great to be back on to be interviewing Paul Campbell from Northwestern, Kellogg. Paul, great to have you on the program. We'd love to hear a little bit of a background about yourself and how you came to be where you are right now.
So yeah, thank you, Jerry. It's wonderful to be here. I did not grow up in academia. I was a lawyer that thought if I went back and got my MBA, it would make me a better lawyer. And business school completely ruined me as a lawyer because I realized I wanted to go to the business side. Ultimately fell in love with healthcare, was on the payer side with United Healthcare for many years while teaching as an adjunct, and then joined the faculty full-time here 4 years ago, and also serve as the executive director of the program.
Awesome. Yeah, we're getting a couple of smiling faces in the virtual reactions from the crowd from your description of your background. But yeah, awesome to have you in the program. Thanks for giving us a bit of an insight to your background. We've had a couple of startups on today that we've been working with, so we'd love to sort of maybe start the conversation around your perspective as to like the primary reasons for the disconnects you may be seeing between startups in the value-based care space and the funding that they're looking for, that they need to drive their solutions, and maybe if you can touch on some of the recurring challenges that are sort of hindering that process.
Yeah, so I think there's no shortage of challenges, and Stan said in the last segment that maybe not everyone understands value-based care. I think it's really important to understand the value chain in healthcare. So a simple definition of strategy I like to use is an interconnected set of choices that positions you on the playing field of your choice in a way you can win. And what I like about that definition is that it forces you to visualize a playing field. And if there's a playing field, there's got to be other players. And I think sometimes we don't spend enough time thinking about them, focusing about them. It's the old WIFM. Right? What's in it for me, or maybe what's in it for them? So very briefly, the three that I want to talk about today is patients, providers, and payers, right? And we'll go in ascendancy of difficulty. Patients, I think most startups, most companies, they think about their customer, but are they really doing it in a way that's focusing on quality versus cost reduction versus, as Stan said, the patient experience? Right? And you've really got to understand what is your unique value prop in that arena. Providers, being married to a healthcare provider, I'm contractually bound to sort of talk about how much they obviously care about good patient care. But as Lincoln famously said, all men and all women act on incentives. So the question really is, what's going to drive them to change clinical care models? I want to take a moment and put a plug in for a book. I didn't write this. I get no commission on it. It's recently come out by James and Robert Rybitzer. Why Not Better and Cheaper? And now you probably can't see it, but it's 115 pages. So I think it's uniquely positioned for a startup because it's a quick read with a lot of great information that really gets into the heart of incentives around healthcare. And it talks a lot about the norms of providers. So let me quote one little piece. They were talking about AI, which I know just was talked about earlier today. Mm-hmm. Quote, if this provokes an adverse reaction from professional peers who may view the changes as undermining the art of medicine, even a powerful financial incentive may not be sufficient for the innovation to be adopted. At the heart, do doctors really believe that this is going to improve patient care, or do they think this is just going to make the hospital more money or a payer more money, right? So that really is at the heart of that professional norm. But then asking questions like, what drives their revenue? How do they get paid? It really comes back to these alternative payment methods, which I know is difficult. They're evolving, but they are the future of healthcare. And if you don't have a sense of what the different alternative payment models are, what value-based care is, and how that's going to impact whoever you're trying to sell your product into, there's going to be a disconnect there, right? There's a difference between a primary care physicians and orthopedics and nursing homes. So you have to really kind of understand their business model. And then, of course, there are economics behind the commercial market versus the Medicare fee-for-service versus the Medicare Advantage market. And then if you get into Medicaid, it's fee for service versus the ever-growing managed care. And I know with a startup trying to think about everything that goes into that, that is not easy, but you've got to be able to understand some of these. There was a startup recently that asked me, what's the difference between Medicare and Medicaid? You've got to understand some of those fundamentals. And then payers, they're the most difficult, but the first question you have to ask yourself is, does the current reimbursement system pay for my product or solution? Is there a CPT code? Can I get compensation now? Because if you're trying to create a whole new sort of reimbursement system, that is a huge rock up a very steep hill. And then I think the second question that people don't really sort of address fully is, does your product or service sufficiently materially improve a standard of care, right? It can't just be something that's good or something that's better. It's got to be sufficiently material improvement. Other questions, who's the ultimate buyer? Are you talking about selling into a large payer like a United, an Aetna, a Cigna, a Humana, or a single state blue? That can dictate a little bit your approach. Is this product or solution fit with commercial? And is that ASO versus fully assured? I know I'm using the alphabet soup here, so I hope if anything that just tells people they've got to do some basic homework in that regard. And are you trying to address the Medicare versus the Medicaid market? And then finally, do you understand the way the industry thinks about quality? Stars ratings for Medicare Advantage, HEDIS scores. 90% of health plans use HEDIS scores, and you've got to be able to understand how your product impacts HEDIS scores, or if it's a risk adjustment model, what's the RAF score? So at the end of the day, know the playing field and know what matters to some of these other key players.
No, really, really awesome. Really great analogy to start off with, Paul. And, I think it's, with you're getting a lot of responses in the chat about, you'd be really spot on around, really looking at the fundamentals around what these startups sort of need to focus on, in order to be able to sort of think in the, from the other, from those sort of perspectives. When they're sort of looking for that, that type of funding. I want to, just as we sort of wrap up, I want to sort of like look, I suppose, onto the other shoe in terms of your insights around, the healthcare incubators right now, the accelerators and the different innovation hubs that are working with these startups and their role in sort of helping these guys in value-based care refine their solutions, and they're connecting to these different funding opportunities.
Well, I have to admit I have never worked in a startup, but I can only imagine. And from talking to them, I know that there's always a need for that support system around them. And I think the first thing any investor is evaluating is the team and who they invest in you as much as the product. So I think being part of an accelerator, part of an incubator, I know we have many of them here in Chicago, it really helps you to enhance your team and tap into that network that you need to be able to understand some of these larger trends. I think it helps you on scalability. It helps you with resources in terms of understanding the regulatory environment, which is another area that we haven't even begun to touch on. And I think it'll help you in terms of continuing to improve your business model. If you're not using the business model canvas as a startup, you should be. It's a way to just continue to iterate, which of course is such an important component of any startup. And being part of that community, being part of an incubator, in addition to the financial support, is just, I think, the support for you to be creatively thinking about your business model.